There is a specific silence inside a sensitive compartmentalized information facility. It is a heavy pressurized silence, smelling of recycled air, ozone, and the quiet hum of servers that hold the potential to level cities. I have lived in that silence for 15 years, knowing the rhythm of national defense better than my own heartbeat. Designing the encryption for a $2 billion missile response protocol means writing the architecture of survival. I am not a soldier, but my weapon is logic, and my battlefield is usually a whiteboard at the Pentagon. But 3 months ago, the battlefield shifted to a glass-walled corporate office in Northern Virginia, and the enemy was Bradley Stone, a suit with a freshly printed business card and a smile that did not reach his eyes. I walked into the lobby of Helix Systems at 7:45. The building is an architectural flex designed to look transparent while hiding everything. Usually the guards, Thomas and Harrison, give me a nod, knowing better than to ask for identification. But today, Thomas was not at the desk. A new nervous guard was tapping a tablet. I approached the turnstiles, pulled my badge from my purse, and tapped it. It beeped twice, flashing a red light. Access denied flashed on the screen. The guard told me that if the badge was not working, I would need to sign in at the guest kiosk. The air felt thin. I looked at the badge, a symbol of 10 years of clearance work. To be relegated to the guest kiosk was an administrative insult. I told him my name is Eleanor Vance, lead architect for the Sentinel Protocol, and that my clearance is higher than the chief executive officer's. The guard checked his screen, apologizing that the system listed me as an external vendor pending expiration. Pending expiration. The words hung in the air like toxic smoke. I did not argue. Rule number 1 of engagement is to never waste ammunition on a target that does not matter. The guard was a pawn. The person moving him was upstairs on the 40th floor. I walked over to the tablet, typed Eleanor Vance, and entered Bradley Stone as the person I was visiting. I printed the sticky paper badge, slapped it onto the lapel of my tailored blazer, and felt like a target waiting for the elevator. I let my mind run a diagnostic. The project was in phase 4, weeks away from the final review, and integration testing was 90% complete. The only variable that had changed in the last month was the leadership structure at Helix. The old vice president had retired, replaced by Bradley Stone, who spent the last 5 years optimizing synergies at a logistics firm. Bradley thought transmission control protocol was a brand of craft beer. The elevator dinged. I stepped in, surrounded by junior analysts doom-scrolling. They had no idea that the code running security on their devices was based on a kernel I wrote in 2014. Reaching the 40th floor, the atmosphere felt performative. People were walking faster, carrying folders that were likely blank. I walked to my office, the corner one with the view of the river, or rather, what used to be my office. The door was open. Inside, 2 facilities guys were moving a ficus tree. My mahogany desk, where I had mapped out the logic gates for the missile interceptors, was gone, replaced by a glass table. One guy wiped sweat from his forehead, explaining Mr. Stone had moved my files and safe drives to the annex, in cubicle 4B, because he was repurposing the space for collaborative ideation. The annex was code for the overflow area near the bathrooms, where they put summer interns and contractors they were about to fire. I felt a cold prickle of heat. It was not anger. Anger makes you sloppy. This was adrenaline. Bradley was not just moving my desk, he was rewriting the narrative, physically removing me from the center of power before the final payout. I walked to the annex. In a tiny cubicle sat a cardboard box with my personal effects, a framed photo of my dog, a stress ball, and my engineering award. My secure terminal, with direct lines to the Pentagon test servers, was disconnected on the floor. I sat in the squeaky rolling chair, took a deep breath, and opened my personal laptop, air-gapped and encrypted with a key that exists only in my head. I opened a new file named Log 0. If Bradley wanted to play a game of visibility, he was about to learn a lesson about camouflage. The most dangerous things are the ones you do not see until the impact counter hits 0. I opened my email on my phone. Bradley's message, sent at 7:30 in the morning, was titled Transition and Alignment. He requested that I route all technical queries through his office to ensure a unified voice for the client, thanking me for being a team player. Unified voice, I whispered. He meant his voice. I took a screenshot. Checking the calendar, I saw a strategic overview meeting at 10 in the morning. I was not invited. It was 8:15. I had 1 hour and 45 minutes to prepare. I would not crash the meeting. I was going to be the ghost in the machine. I began documenting every broken protocol and security violation caused by moving my equipment. Bradley thought he had demoted me. He did not realize he had just given me a field position, and in the field I never miss. The annex was acoustically perfect for eavesdropping. The partition walls were thin, and the ventilation ducts carried sound from the conference room down the hall with surprising clarity. I sat in the squeaky chair and listened to the preliminary murmurs of the 10 o'clock meeting. Bradley Stone walked past the annex entrance at 5 minutes to 10, wearing an expensive suit. He was talking to his assistant, Clara. Bradley asked her if she had scrubbed the headers on the slide deck. Clara whispered that she had replaced the author E. Vance metadata with the company logo. Bradley approved, asking about the encryption logic summary. Clara replied that she had simplified the mathematics into bullet points. Bradley called it excellent, saying they did not want to confuse the stakeholders with the details, but needed to sell the vision instead. I felt a muscle in my jaw jump. The details he referred to were the cryptographic proofs that ensured a hacker could not redirect a missile into a population center. He was simplifying national security into a presentation slide. I waited until they entered the conference room. Opening the messaging application on my phone, I watched in real time as the file Sentinel Protocol Final was modified. The last edited tag switched from E. Vance to B. Stone. He was erasing the audit trail. This was dangerous. If something went wrong, the investigators would look at the metadata. If his name was on it, he would be liable. But Bradley was too arrogant to understand the liability he was absorbing. He only saw the potential glory. I walked past the conference room to see this vision in action. The walls were glass, but they had been frosted recently. The door was slightly open. I paused, pretending to check a message. Bradley was speaking, projecting his voice. He claimed that the key to the Sentinel system was the synergistic overlay of the artificial intelligence heuristics. I almost laughed. Synergistic overlay. I had written a polymorphic engine that adapted to intrusion attempts in nanoseconds. He made it sound like a marketing filter. Dr. Robert Finch, the lead systems engineer, interrupted. He explained that the heuristic engine was not an overlay, but the kernel itself. He warned that if they treated it as an overlay in the documentation, the Department of Defense compliance team would flag it as a vulnerability. Bradley spoke in a condescendingly patient tone, saying he appreciated the technical details. But they were speaking to generals, not software engineers. He argued that the generals wanted to know it worked and did not care how it was built, suggesting they focus on the impressiveness. The impressiveness. I closed my eyes for a second. This man was going to get people killed. I walked back to my cubicle. My phone buzzed. It was an email from the legal department. The subject was contractor status review. It stated that per the request of the vice president, they were reviewing the necessity of external consultancy for the maintenance phase. They requested that I surrender my physical access keys to security by the end of the day on Friday, and that my digital access would be transitioned to read-only status effective immediately. Friday was 3 days away. The final presentation to the Pentagon was next Tuesday. Bradley was timing this perfectly. He wanted me gone before the general arrived. I did not reply to the legal department. I did not storm into the meeting. Instead, I opened my personal laptop again. I accessed a secure, encrypted partition that contained my insurance policy. Years ago, when I was working military logistics, I learned a vital lesson. Never build a house you cannot lock from the outside. The Sentinel protocol was my house. While Bradley had the keys to the front door, he did not know about the foundation inspection hatch. I began to type. I was not sabotaging the code. That would be treason. Instead, I was activating a latent logging feature I had embedded deep within the compiler. Every keystroke, every file modification, every version change made by Bradley or his team would now be mirrored to a secure server in my control. If he wanted to own the code, he was going to own every single mistake he made with it. Around noon, Bradley emerged from the conference room, highly satisfied with himself. He spotted me in the annex and walked over, leaning against the partition of my cubicle. He called my name and said they had a great session in there, really moving the project forward. I told him I heard about their focus on impressiveness without looking up. He chuckled, missing the sarcasm, and agreed, saying the transition to the annex was abrupt but necessary to reduce costs. He claimed that with the project moving to maintenance, they could handle the day-to-day operations. I looked him in the eye and told him the protocol was in pre-deployment validation. I warned him that if he changed the metadata headers, he would break the checksums and the Department of Defense servers would reject the update. He waved a hand dismissively, saying they would fix it later. He asked me to forward all my raw data files to Clara, saying they were consolidating the archives. I agreed and mentioned Friday. He confirmed Friday and said they wanted a clean break with no loose ends. No loose ends, I repeated. He tapped the top of my cubicle wall and walked away, whistling. He thought he had just dismissed an unimportant contractor. He did not realize he had just dismissed the only person who knew how to fly the plane he was currently piloting. I turned back to my screen. The mirroring script was active. I opened a new document, logging the unauthorized metadata modification and the risk of checksum failure. I was building a complete dossier. There is a diner about 5 miles south of the Helix Systems headquarters. It is called The Hangar, and it has not been renovated since the Cold War. The vinyl booths are cracked, the coffee tastes like battery acid, and it is the preferred meeting spot for officers who want to talk without a paper trail. I arrived at 6 o'clock in the evening. The lunch rush was long gone, and the dinner crowd had not arrived. The place was empty except for a truck driver eating dinner, and in the back booth sat Colonel Raymond Alvarez. Colonel Alvarez was not wearing his uniform. He was in a gray hoodie and jeans, looking like a tired father rather than the man responsible for the logistical deployment of the missile defense shield. But his posture gave him away. His back was straight, and his eyes scanned the entrance every 3 seconds. When he saw me, he did not smile. He just nodded and moved his coffee cup to clear space on the table. I slid into the booth opposite him. I told him he looked tired, and he countered that I looked dressed for a funeral. I replied that perhaps I was, and ordered my coffee black when the waitress arrived. When the waitress left, I leaned in. I told him the comms flags on the Sentinel project were weird because Bradley Stone was rewriting history, scrubbing my name, and signing the code which blocks himself. Colonel Alvarez swore quietly, rubbing his face with both hands. He said he knew it and had warned the general that Helix Systems was getting unstable. He asked who this man was. I explained that Bradley was a business executive with a degree in administration and a track reduction record in cost optimization, who did not know a logic gate from a garden gate. I told him Bradley was the new vice president and that my contract was being terminated on Friday. Colonel Alvarez froze. He looked at me with great intensity. He muttered that terminating me before the final review was madness, as the general would not sign off on a system if the architect was not there to vouch for it. I explained that Bradley believed he could handle it himself, thinking it was just a matter of presentation. Colonel Alvarez hissed that Bradley was going to crash the entire network. He warned that if Bradley forced an update with broken checksums during the live demonstration next week, the system would lock down. I finished his thought, explaining that the system would interpret the mismatch as a hostile injection, locking the defense servers for 48 hours while it cleared the cache, leaving them blind. He looked ready to strike the table. He suggested calling the general immediately to have the military police remove Bradley from his office. I told him no, not yet. He asked why. I explained that if we intervene now, Bradley would claim I was a disgruntled contractor trying to damage the company, and that the military was overreaching. I noted that Bradley had the board's support by promising higher margins. I reached into my purse and pulled out a small, ruggedized external hard drive. It was black, heavy, and quiet. He asked what it was. I slid it across the table, explaining it contained the source code as of 7 o'clock that morning, signed with my private key. I added that it also contained a log of every change Bradley had made, the original threat simulations he deleted because they were too negative, and the emails instructing his team to bypass safety protocols. Colonel Alvarez covered the drive with his hand. He asked if I wanted him to hold it. I told him to keep it off the network and not plug it into any official machines, but to have it ready when the time came. He asked when that would be. I told him Tuesday during the final presentation. A slow, grim smile touched his lips as he realized the plan. He remarked that I was letting Bradley hang himself. I corrected him, saying I was just handing him the rope, while Bradley was the one tying the knot. The waitress returned and refilled the coffee. I took a sip of the bitter drink. Colonel Alvarez mentioned they were hearing that the board was nervous but liked Bradley's numbers, and that if he succeeded with the presentation, he would be untouchable. I assured him Bradley would not succeed. He asked how I could be certain. I looked out the window at the flickering street lamp. I explained that Bradley viewed the Sentinel protocol as a product, not understanding that it was a living system, and thought he could bully the code like he bullied his staff. I turned back to him. I revealed that I had built a dependency into the core logic, requiring a cryptographic handshake entered by the lead architect every 30 days. If that handshake did not occur, the system would lock down. I added that the handshake was due on Tuesday at 1400 hours, right in the middle of his presentation. Colonel Alvarez laughed, a short barking sound, and remarked that I was cold. I told him I was not cold, just representing quality control. The next morning, I engaged in the corporate ritual of visiting human resources. In the corporate world, human resources is often described as a neutral arbiter. In reality, they function as the immune system of the company, designed to identify and isolate foreign bodies. And at that moment, I was the foreign body. I sat across from a woman named Brooke, who was in her 20s with a smile that looked as though it had been tested by a focus group. Her office was decorated with inspirational posters about teamwork and success. Brooke scanned the formal complaint I had slid across her desk. I told her I was documenting intellectual property theft, as Bradley Stone had removed my name from the copyright headers of federal defense software, which was a serious violation. I added that he had also instructed the engineering staff to ignore safety protocols. Brooke sighed, treating me like an unreasonable child. She argued that Bradley was dynamic and had a new style, suggesting that change could sometimes feel like hostility. She claimed they had to look at the big picture and that he was trying to create a cohesive brand narrative. I told her we were building missile defense systems, not selling consumer goods, and warned that if the configuration was wrong, people would die. Brooke tapped her pen, commenting on my attitude being rigid and not a good culture fit. She noted that my contract was ending and suggested it was best to accept the severance and move on rather than burning bridges. I stood up and told her I was not burning bridges, but reporting an arsonist. Brooke did not write anything down or open a file. She just offered her plastic smile, saying the board was very happy with Bradley's direction. I walked out. I had done my duty and filed the paperwork. The system had failed to correct itself, so I was now free to use a manual override. I returned to the annex. It was Thursday, with only 1 day left before my access was revoked. I had to move quickly. I waited until lunch. The office cleared out around 12:30. Bradley always took a 2-hour lunch with potential investors at his country club. The workspace was quiet. I opened my laptop and connected to the internal network. Because Bradley had insisted on simplifying access, he had merged the administrator permissions. In his arrogance, he had given himself super user status, but had not changed the default root password on the new server cluster. I logged in using the username admin and the password 123. It was a pathetic security failure. I navigated to the core directory and found the file Sentinel kernel version 5. This was the build they planned to demonstrate on Tuesday. I opened the code. I did not delete anything, as that would be sabotage. Instead, I located the 3 key modules responsible for the graphical user interface, the visual presentation that Bradley loved. I applied a layer of encryption to them. It was not a heavy encryption, just enough that the system would need to verify the author's credentials to render the graphics. If the author was listed as Bradley Stone, the system would check his cryptographic hash against the code's hash. Since Bradley had never written a line of code, the hashes would not match. The system would not crash, but it would refuse to display the visual interface. Instead, it would display a raw error log showing critical error 403, author verification failed, and requesting the administrator be contacted. I set the encryption to activate on a timer for Tuesday at 13:59, 1 minute before the presentation was scheduled to begin. I also located the email Bradley had sent to the chief financial officer. He wrote that they should not worry about my complaints, calling me a dinosaur of the old guard. He claimed he would have me out by Friday, and that they could reallocate my budget to marketing once I was gone, questioning the need for an expensive architect for maintenance. I saved the email. Then I performed one minor, satisfying edit. I went into the digital cafeteria menu for the following week and changed the entry for Tuesday to Traders Get Tacos. I closed my laptop. My hands were steady. The trap was set. It was not a destructive mechanism, but a mirror. All Bradley had to do was stand in front of it, and the world would see him for what he was. As I packed my bag, my phone buzzed with an automated message from the technology department. It was an access revocation notice for user E. Vance, effective tomorrow at 1700 hours. I whispered that they were too late. I walked out of the annex, past the glass conference room, where Bradley's plans were written on a whiteboard in permanent marker. I did not look back. The weekend passed in a blur of nervous energy. I did not sleep much, spending my time reviewing the mirrored logs on my personal server, watching Bradley's digital footprints as he prepared for Tuesday. He was editing slides at 2 in the morning and sending emails to the catering company, focusing on the refreshments rather than the technology. He was rearranging deck chairs on a sinking ship. On Sunday night, my phone buzzed with an unknown number. It was Nathan, a junior developer from the back-end team. He whispered that he was calling from a private line because he was terrified of Bradley finding out. I told him he should not be calling me, but he insisted he had to speak. He revealed that the entire engineering team knew I wrote the kernel, having seen the logs before they were scrubbed. He said Bradley was forcing them to hard-code the simulation results to show a 100% intercept rate, even though the physics engine showed it was actually 85%. He warned that Bradley was faking the data. I told Nathan to do exactly what Bradley asked, and to hard-code the results to let him have his presentation. Nathan was confused, asking what they should do if the system went live. I instructed him to trust me and gave him my secure email address. I told him I was sending a PDF file, which was a timeline of every decision Bradley made that compromised security, cross-referenced with the federal codes he violated. I asked Nathan to forward that file to General Cole's adjutant on Tuesday morning at 9 o'clock. Nathan agreed. Tuesday morning arrived with a dark, rainy sky. I drove to Helix Systems and arrived at 13:30. The parking lot was filled with black vehicles belonging to the General's entourage. I walked to the entrance. The guard Thomas looked panicked when he saw me, saying he could not let me in because Mr. Stone had put me on the exclusion list. I pulled out my Department of Defense contractor badge, which granted access to any facility hosting classified government material. I warned him that blocking me would be obstructing a federal audit. The guard turned pale and let me pass. I took the elevator to the 40th floor. The hallway leading to the boardroom was lined with fresh flowers that smelled like a funeral. I pushed the double doors open. The room froze. General Douglas Cole sat at the head of the table. Beside him was Colonel Alvarez, who gave me a brief nod. On the other side were the Helix executives and Bradley. Bradley was holding a laser pointer, and his smile faltered when he saw me. He walked over to block me, asking what I was doing there and calling me support staff. He turned to the room, apologizing to the general for the disruption and claiming it was a miscommunication. He whispered to me that contractors had to wait outside. The room was silent. No one spoke. I asked him if that was his final decision. He confirmed it and asked me to leave. I turned to walk away. Suddenly, General Cole's voice boomed through the room, asking Bradley if he had just referred to Ms. Vance as support staff. Bradley stammered, claiming she was just an external contractor and that they were streamlining operations. The general stood up, moving toward him, and barked that he did not care about corporate hierarchies. He pointed out that Ms. Vance was listed as the lead architect on the documentation. Bradley argued that he had been overseeing the strategic vision, and that code was just a commodity. General Cole turned to me and invited me back to the table. He looked at the Helix chief executive officer and stated that this woman had written the encryption that kept foreign actors out of the servers. He warned that if she left the room, the government would cancel the $2 billion contract immediately. The CEO turned white, apologizing. The general then ordered Bradley to run the live simulation. Bradley scrambled to his laptop and initiated the launch sequence. I checked my watch. It was 13:59. The screen went black and then bright red text appeared. Critical error 403. Author verification failed. Cryptographic handshake required. Please contact lead architect E. Vance. The room went silent. Bradley panicked, hitting keys and claiming it was a minor glitch. I explained that the system required the lead architect to verify the build integrity every 30 days to prevent unauthorized users from deploying it. I pointed out that, because Bradley had removed my name from the authorization list, the system assumed he was a hostile actor and locked him out. Bradley turned to me, desperately begging me to fix it. General Cole crossed his arms and told Bradley he could admit he did not know how to run the system or crash it. Bradley whispered that he did not know the key. The general ordered Bradley to step away. I sat down, connected my laptop, and entered the override. The red screen vanished, replaced by the map. The simulation ran perfectly, showing a successful intercept. The general praised the system and told the CEO to fix their personnel problem immediately. Bradley was ordered to the CEO's office and escorted out with his box. The fallout was swift. Bradley Stone was dismissed. The CEO restored my office, doubled my budget, and gave my team raises. An internal memo announced that all defense projects would report to the new Office of Advanced Technology under me as Chief Technical Officer, complete with a corner office and a salary increase. Later, General Cole called to congratulate me and offered me a new project, the Civil Resilience Network, a massive infrastructure integration that was messy and complicated. I smiled, accepted the challenge, and opened a new file on my computer. I was back in command and I had work to do.